Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we stand beneath a sky that doesn't make sense anymore. The clouds are too quiet. The wind forgot its direction. And someone somewhere probably blames you. After all, it didn't rain last week, and now the cabbages are wilting, the cows are anxious, and the village priest is eyeing the shepherd again. Not kindly. Welcome to the strange, damp, occasionally overheated world of weather superstitions, where the forecast isn't read, it's whispered. Where the moon decides your dinner party, and a cat sneezing at dawn could mean either blessings or apocalypse. Where stones predict storms, priests shout at the heavens, and nobility rearranges dessert based on goose bones. You might not survive this one, especially if you forget your offering to the storm spirits again. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. You wake up before the sun, not because you're eager, but because the sheep are already arguing. One is stuck in a ditch. One is chewing something it probably shouldn't. The sky is pale, stretched thin like an old blanket. Someone tried to patch it with wishful thinking. No clouds, no breeze, no shade, just heat gathering in the corners of everything under your collar, between your toes, inside your thoughts. You squint upward, hoping for something. Maybe a single drifting cloud, a reluctant puff of wind, a passing bird with a helpful opinion. Nothing. It hasn't rained in 23 days. Not that you're counting. Everyone else is, though. And they're looking at you like it's your fault, because you're the shepherd. And shepherds, in this region of unfortunate logic, have a connection to the skies. Why? Because you spend your days outdoors. Which, to them, means you must have some kind of influence. You do not. You have influence over sheep. Barely. But logic isn't what the village is operating on. They're operating on desperation, cracked soil, and a well that now makes hollow coughing sounds instead of delivering water. So when the drought continues, they begin to search for answers. And by answers, they mean someone to blame. That someone is usually you. At first, it's subtle. A few mutters when you walk through town. An extra long prayer during Mass, featuring pointed glances in your direction. Then come the not-so-subtle suggestions. Maybe you've angered the clouds, they say. Maybe the sheep saw something. One old man insists that you walked counterclockwise around the barley field last Tuesday. This, apparently, invites drought. You didn't. You walked straight. But he's already telling others. By the end of the week, a small child throws a beet at you. A soft beet, but still. It lands with a sad thump against your ankle. Trailing dust instead of juice, another victim of the drought. The message is clear. You are now the designated scapegoat. The weather is your fault. Meanwhile, your sheep don't care. They graze on weeds that crunch like old parchment. Their wool traps heat like a curse. You try trimming one and end up covered in sticky lanolin and regret. The sun mocks you from every direction. Even the shadows are hot. You find yourself bargaining with the sky. One cloud. Just one. A whisper of thunder. A drop of something. Even bird droppings would count as weather at this point. But the sky remains aloof, a dry, white sheet stretched too tightly over a slowly cooking world. You try everything. Standing on one leg, spitting toward the wind, placing a rock under your tongue. You once heard that if you bury a round stone by a sheep's hoofprint, it will summon clouds. You do it. Nothing happens. Except now you're missing a perfectly good stone. So you do what shepherds always do. You keep walking. You watch the horizon. You murmur complaints to the sheep, who ignore you with practiced indifference. And you wait. Because weather doesn't care about need or fairness or your peeling sunburn. It comes when it wants. Like a cat with no loyalty and very sharp claws. You've been staring at the sky for 3 hours. There is nothing in it. Not a bird. Not a breeze. Not even one of those passing wisps of cloud that looks like a goat if you squint sideways and have heat stroke. Just an endless sun-bleached expanse that feels like someone scraped the sky clean with a giant wooden spoon and forgot to stop. You're not sure if you're praying or hallucinating, or both. Cloud watching used to be a pastime. Something gentle, quiet, maybe even poetic, if you had enough bread in your stomach to feel poetic. Now it's an act of survival. You need rain. The sheep need grass. The grass needs clouds. And the clouds need convincing. Your job description has changed. You're no longer a shepherd. You are now an amateur meteorologist with no tools, no training, and several aggressively skeptical goats. Villagers have started asking you for weather predictions as if you're the local wizard. One of them even brings you a clump of hair and asks you to read the static. You stare at it for a long time and say, very solemnly, maybe Thursday. They nod. They tell their cousin. By morning, 3 people have thanked you for your prophecy. You haven't slept properly in days. The ground beneath your feet is hard and cracked, a patchwork of brittle plates that crunch like old bones when you shift your weight. The sheep move reluctantly, picking through dust and thorn, their hooves puffing up dry little clouds of despair with every step. They look thinner. You do too. You try to lead them toward the hills, hoping the higher elevation might bring cooler air or at least a breeze. It doesn't. It just brings more silence. The kind of silence that buzzes, not with peace, but with pressure. You've started to imagine the wind not feel it, just imagine it brushing against your face like memory, the memory of something kinder. You tell yourself it's coming. You tell yourself that every gust starts somewhere. There is a stone outcrop near the top of the hill. You sit on it, sweating into your wool tunic, which now smells like a damp goat that's given up on life. The view is expansive, though unchanging. Fields stretch out in every direction, dry and colourless, like someone painted the world in dust and ran out of ink halfway through. The local priest told you yesterday that droughts are a divine punishment. You asked what they're punishing you for. He said, "We all sin," which is not particularly helpful, especially when your biggest sin lately has been swearing at a particularly stubborn you. You lie back and try to see shapes in the clouds. There are no clouds, but you pretend anyway. That one might be a dragon, or a loaf of bread, or maybe just the sun burning patterns into your retinas. Either way, the game passes time. You've named 12 imaginary clouds in the last hour. One of them is called Gerald. Gerald looks disappointed in you. Your water skin is almost empty. You tell yourself the sheep can go another day without much grazing. You tell yourself the rain is waiting, just behind the hill, just around the corner, just beyond whatever logic this sky is following today. And you keep watching. Because what else is there to do? You're just trying to feed sheep. That's all. You don't pray wrong. You don't spit near the sacred ewe. You didn't insult the miller's wife recently. But somehow, the entire village has decided that you've offended the weather, and the weather is now retaliating with a deeply personal kind of dryness. Not just no rain, no dew, no mist. The air itself feels like it's been wrung out and hung up in the sun to crisp. The baker won't sell you bread anymore. Not because you can't pay, but because he claims your bad luck smell will seep into the dough. You try to argue that dough doesn't absorb misfortune. He counters with a detailed story about his cousin's wedding feast and a weeping goat. You stop arguing. The livestock are feeling it too, not just the sheep. The chickens have stopped laying eggs and now pace in tiny circles, as if rehearsing some kind of avian protest. The cow down the lane refuses to moo unless it's bribed with turnip peelings. And the village pig, a creature of immense girth, an alarming cunning has taken to knocking over water buckets just to watch everyone panic. At the edge of the field, the well has started making a new noise. Less a splash, more a sigh. A long, wheezing exhale, like the earth itself is tired of all this. And still no clouds. You make the mistake of walking past the church. On a Wednesday afternoon, it's quiet. Too quiet. Which is how you know something's wrong. The priest, whose robe smells faintly of mildew and self-righteousness, emerges slowly, with a group of villagers trailing behind him like a particularly angry choir. They surround you. "Have you," he says slowly, "performed any unclean rituals near the stream?" You blink. He continues, "Someone saw you 3 mornings ago, standing with your arms raised, facing east, near a rock shaped like a sleeping dog. You try to remember. You were probably stretching. Your back was sore. The rock did look like a dog, but it also looked like a potato. You say this. They do not laugh. A woman clutches a dried-out bouquet and whispers that her radishes have shriveled into little demon fingers. A boy says he saw a lizard blink twice, which apparently means something. A man behind him insists your sheep are cursed because one of them walked backward during the eclipse. You would argue, but you don't. There's something deeply unproductive about arguing with people whose logic now includes lizard blinking and moon-based sheep orientation. So you nod, slowly, and walk away. Very slowly. By evening a new rumor has spread. You once spoke to a storm and told it to go away. You don't remember this. You once shouted at some thunder after it spooked your flock. But now, apparently, you are a storm banishment specialist. Congratulations. The goats know none of this. They climb rocks, chew bark, and sneeze dramatically. One of them has started headbutting the same fence post every morning. It seems like a coping mechanism. You're starting to understand it. Because somehow, in a world where no one controls the sky, the one thing people can control is the scapegoat. And today, that goat is you. Again. At some point, it becomes official. The priest announces it during the morning bell, not with a sense of urgency, but with the resigned tone of a man. A man who knows this isn't going to work but needs to do something. A public prayer circle. Everyone must attend. Attendance is not technically mandatory, but if you don't show up, people will assume you're dancing naked in the woods with demons and deliberately drying up their bean patches. So you go. You bring your best tunic. The one that doesn't itch quite as much and only has one questionable stain. You herd the sheep into a pen, though one of them escapes halfway down the lane, and insists on following you to the chapel. She is not subtle. She bleats every 5 steps like an insulted opera singer. The chapel smells like smoke, beeswax, and old expectations. It's too warm inside, even though the windows are open, and someone's wafting a piece of slate in the vague direction of airflow. The pews are filled with fidgeting farmers, wide-eyed children, and the village scribe, who seems to be writing down how everyone reacts just in case anyone needs blaming later. The priest begins. He speaks of cleansing, of confession, of divine disappointment. He suggests that someone unnamed, but his eyes drift toward you twice, may have upset the natural balance by committing acts of selfishness, like hoarding rainwater, or bathing too often, or disrespecting the moon with sarcastic thoughts. You try to look repentant. It's difficult when your main sin lately has been swearing at rocks for being too sharp. He continues. There will be fasting, he says, a day without food to humble the soul and invite divine pity. You look around. Most of these people already skipped breakfast. Pity is not what's missing. Calories are. Then come the songs. Ancient hymns about rivers, fields, clouds. Sung off key, in voices cracked from thirst and disuse. You mouth the words. A child behind you keeps poking your tunic and whispering that their goat had a dream and thinks you're the problem. You nod politely and mentally vow never to make eye contact with a goat again. After the singing, the priest announces a plan. The entire village will march to the hill tomorrow morning, barefoot, and plead with the sky in a ceremonial formation. Some will carry torches. Others will wave branches. A few select individuals chosen by dream omen, familiar luck, or because they didn't say no fast enough will shout at the sky. You are one of them. You ask why. He says you have the look of someone the sky might recognize. You don't know what this means. Possibly it's an insult. Possibly it's your hair. Possibly he's just tired of guessing. By nightfall, the rumors have grown new legs. Now they say the ritual was your idea, that you'll be leading the chant, that your grandmother once married a cloud and cursed the valley. You no longer bother correcting people. You just feed the sheep. Drink tepid water from a cracked jug and wonder if the sky will be kinder tomorrow. It probably won't. But you'll still be expected to yell at it anyway. The next morning, you wake before dawn, because apparently shouting at the sky requires preparation. You step outside and immediately regret it. The air is already warm. Not the nice kind of warm, but the kind that sticks to your teeth. It feels like breathing through a piece of stale bread someone tried to toast on a rock. You're supposed to fast. The priest said it would increase the ritual's potency, but you had half a turnip last night, and you're still chewing it in your dreams. Your stomach feels like it's trying to eat your spine. The sheep stare at you with blank judgment. One of them sneezes and it sounds sarcastic. At the base of the hill, the villagers gather, barefoot as instructed. The mood is not hopeful. It's not solemn either. It's more like the atmosphere before a parade. A poorly organized parade or a riot led by extremely polite people. Some carry sticks. Others hold dried herbs. A woman has tied an onion to her hat. You don't ask. The priest arrives in his ceremonial robes, which used to be white, but now resemble the color of boiled parsnips. He begins the procession with a chant, something about clouds and humility and divine favor. It rhymes badly. No one joins in. A goat bleats. You walk. Up the hill, one slow, dry step at a time. The earth is cracked like old pottery, sharp at the edges, and your feet are not thanking you for this. You step on something, maybe a thistle, maybe a bone, maybe the ghost of someone else's failed harvest. Doesn't matter. You limp. You keep going. At the top, there's a flat patch of earth surrounded by rocks. Rocks that look vaguely like judgmental furniture. This is the sacred spot, or it is now. The priest turns and nods to you. It's your moment. You take a deep breath, not because it will help, but because you need time to decide whether or not to run. Then, slowly you raise your arms and do what has been asked of you. You yell at the sky. You yell about the heat, about the cracked fields, about the shriveled radishes, the whispering goats, the sleeping well. You shout words that sound vaguely ritualistic. Then you shout words that are just you giving up. Your voice echoes briefly. A bird flies away. Or maybe it just gave up too. The villagers stand in a wide circle, watching. Some nod. A few mumble along. One elderly woman starts sobbing. But it's unclear whether it's out of faith, hunger, or disappointment. The sky does not answer. It stares back, blank as ever. Someone begins clapping. Others join in. Not because it worked, but because you did something. And that, apparently, is enough for today. You are escorted back down the hill, like a hero. A very tired, barefoot, slightly sunburned hero with twigs stuck to your knees and a beetle in your sleeve. The clouds never come. Not that day. Not the next. But now, when people talk about the drought, they say, "At least we tried." And when they say we, they mean you. You limp back to your sheep. One of them has escaped again and is chewing on your best sandal. You sigh and wait for the sky to change its mind. The next morning, you wake before dawn, because apparently shouting at the sky requires preparation. You step outside and immediately regret it. The air is already warm, not the nice kind of warm, but the kind that sticks to your teeth. It feels like breathing through a piece of stale bread someone tried to toast on a rock. You're supposed to fast. The priest said it would increase the ritual's potency, but you had half a turnip last night, and you're still chewing it in your dreams. Your stomach feels like it's trying to eat your spine. The sheep stare at you with blank judgment. One of them sneezes and it sounds sarcastic. At the base of the hill, the villagers gather, barefoot as instructed. The mood is not hopeful. It's not solemn either. It's more like the atmosphere before a poorly organized parade, or a riot led by extremely polite people. Some carry sticks. Others hold dried herbs. A woman has tied an onion to her hat. You don't ask. The priest arrives in his ceremonial robes, which used to be white but now resemble the color of boiled parsnips. He begins the procession with a chant, Something about clouds and humility and divine favor. It rhymes badly. No one joins in. A goat bleats. You walk. Up the hill, one slow, dry step at a time. The earth is cracked like old pottery, sharp at the edges, and your feet are not thanking you for this. You step on something, maybe a thistle, maybe a bone, maybe the ghost of someone else's failed harvest. Doesn't matter. You limp. You keep going. Rocks that look vaguely like judgmental furniture. This is the sacred spot, or it is now. The priest turns and nods to you. It's your moment. You take a deep breath, not because it will help, but because you need time to decide whether or not to run. Then, slowly, you raise your arms and do what has been asked of you. You yell at the sky. You yell about the heat, about the cracked fields, about the shriveled radishes, the whispering goats, the sleeping well. You shout words that sound vaguely ritualistic. Then you shout words that are just you giving up. Your voice echoes briefly. A bird flies away. Or maybe it just gave up too. The villagers stand in a wide circle, watching. Some nod. A few mumble along. One elderly woman starts sobbing softly, but it's unclear whether it's out of faith, hunger, or disappointment. The sky does not answer. It stares back, blank as ever. Someone begins clapping. Others join in. Not because it worked, but because you did something. And that, apparently, is enough for today. You are escorted back down the hill, like a hero. A very tired, barefoot, slightly sunburned hero with twigs stuck to your knees and a beetle in your sleeve. The clouds never come. Not that day. Not the next. But now, when people talk about the drought, they say, "At least we tried." And when they say we, they mean you. You limp back to your sheep. One of them has escaped again and is chewing on your best sandal. You sigh and wait for the sky to change its mind. The next few days pass in a haze, not a pleasant haze, like the kind that follows wine or a nap in the shade. No, this is the kind that clings. Clings to your skin and your patience, dust everywhere. It crunches between your teeth. It settles into your hair like it's paying rent. It turns your blanket into sandpaper and your throat into a cave of mild despair. You stop trying to keep your tunic clean. It's the same colour as the ground now, somewhere between dirt and accusation. Even the sheep have stopped moving much. They huddle under the one bent tree near the edge of the field, lying there like oddly shaped loaves of bread someone forgot to bake. The grass is gone. Not just dry gone. Pulled up, trampled, turned into memory. You try leading the sheep to another patch beyond the ridge, but it's the same story. The ground splits beneath your feet like an argument with no resolution. The cracks aren't just lines anymore. They're canyons for ants, philosophies for worms. You stare into them longer than you should, wondering if you'll find meaning. You don't. You find a beetle waving its legs at you in vague mockery. At some point, you start talking to things. Not people, not even the sheep, rocks, fence posts, a stick shaped like a spoon. You ask the spoon stick if it thinks rain is coming. It says nothing, which is fair. You try again. This time the silence sounds more encouraging. You place the spoon stick upright in the ground and name it some moisture. You tell no one. In the village, tempers are crisp. The blacksmith refuses to make horseshoes until the horses start sweating again. The brewer is down to his last barrel and has begun charging 2 eggs and a compliment just to smell the cork. The priest hasn't smiled in 3 days, and now claims the drought is a test, though it's unclear if it's a test of faith or a test of who can survive the smell of the communal latrine the longest. There's talk of a pilgrimage, a long walk to a shrine 3 valleys over where it allegedly rained once during a wedding. You're invited. You say maybe. What you mean is no, but you say maybe because saying no would require effort, and effort requires water, and water is fiction. Back in your field you try digging. Just a little. Not out of hope, but because standing still feels like giving up. You dig with a flat rock, and your increasingly blistered hands. The earth gives nothing. No dampness. No worms. Not even a root. Just layer after layer of dry, stubborn nothing. One of the sheep watches you for a while, then turns around and poops on the edge of your trench. It's oddly symbolic. You sit down beside the hole and whisper to it. You say, "It's okay. I wouldn't bloom here either." And the wind, finally faint, dry, barely enough to lift a leaf, passes over you like a shrug. You dream about rain now. Not the stormy kind. Not even the dramatic movie sort that hammers rooftops and drowns bad decisions. No, your dreams are quieter, softer. They begin with the sound of a drip. Just one. Measured, patient, delicate. Like someone pouring tea from an invisible kettle into the cupped hands of the sky. In the dream, you're standing in a field that doesn't look like any field you've ever known. The soil is dark, soft. The grass is green in a way that feels exaggerated, like it's been colored in by a child with too much faith in crayons. You bend down, touch the grass, and it doesn't crumble into ash. It bends, springs back, smells faintly of something alive. You look up. The sky is still grey, but kindly grey. Not the hostile white it's been for weeks. Clouds gather not in threat, but in communion. And from one, a single drop falls. It lands on your forehead. Cold, perfect, real. Then you wake up. You're in your hut. The one with the roof thatched by someone who clearly believed in optimism more than craftsmanship. The ceiling creaks. The walls lean. The floor is mostly compacted regret. You lick your lips. They're cracked. You sit up. Your blanket has managed to twist itself into a shape that actively resists comfort. You shuffle outside. The sky is blank again. So blank it almost feels smug. You hate it a little. There's a bucket by the door. You check it just in case the dew fairy visited. No, it's dry. Drier than yesterday, if that's even possible. The dust around the rim clings to your fingers like it's afraid to be alone. The sheep greet you with the enthusiasm of potatoes. One limps over, gives your shin a headbutt that feels more like a warning than affection, and walks away. You sigh. Your stomach grumbles. You ignore it. There's a bowl of grain mush on the table, yesterday's leftovers, pretending to be food. You eat half, then offer the rest, to the most dramatic of the sheep. She refuses. You sit on the same fence post as the day before, the same one that's beginning to lean from too many tired conversations. You try the cloud game again. You name the sky. You plead with it. You try bargaining. Just 1 hour, you say. Just enough to make the mud squish. Nothing. A breeze kicks up. Not a cool one. More like a breath from a tired dog. Still, it moves the air a little. It flutters the hem of your tunic. Makes the leaves shiver, even if they're more dead than alive. You close your eyes. Try to imagine that drip again. Maybe tonight the dream will return. Maybe this time you'll get to taste the rain. Or maybe the sky will stay dry, silent, and spectacularly unhelpful. And still, you'll wake up. Still thirsty. Still tired. Still watching the heavens like they owe you something they never promised to give. By now, your existence has become part of local folklore. You didn't plan this. You never applied for the position of potential weather witch, but somehow your name keeps slipping into stories that begin with "someone once said," and end with, "and then the rain stopped." A child points at you in the market and whispers, "That's the one who looked at the moon wrong." You weren't even awake that night, but facts no longer matter, only vibes. And your vibes, apparently, are bone dry and vaguely cursed. You overhear things. Someone insists that carrying a pouch of salt and spinning in place 3 times while holding an onion can bring back the clouds. Another swears by rubbing dirt on their elbows while chanting the names of forgotten saints. One man claims he saw a dog bark at the sky. And it rained a week later, therefore, dogs are sacred now. Specifically, that dog. His dog. You suspect he just wanted an excuse to bring it into the tavern. You try to keep a low profile. You sweep your own doorstep, water your sad herbs with borrowed optimism, and avoid commenting on the weather at all costs. One sentence, one careless mention of "it's warm today," and you're back at the center of a theological debate involving radish's divine punishment and the color of your socks. They're brown. Because everything is brown now, But superstition is louder than reason, especially during a drought. One afternoon you find a strange bundle left at the edge of your pasture. It's wrapped in wool, tied with string, and smells faintly of vinegar and garlic. Inside a feather, a lump of bread, and a small painted stone with a spiral. You stare at it. It stares back. You leave it there, because honestly you don't know if it's a curse, a gift, or someone's attempt at weather bribes. The sheep ignore it, probably wise. Later, someone knocks on your door aggressively. It's Mira, the beekeeper's cousin, whose bees have apparently stopped producing anything except anxiety. She demands to know what you did. You tell her nothing. She narrows her eyes and says exactly, like that's some kind of confession. You offer her a wilted turnip. She does not accept it. The next morning your watering jug has gone missing. You find it 3 fields away, upside down, with a note tied to the handle. Stop whispering at the sky. You hadn't been whispering. Not out loud anyway. Meanwhile, the clouds continue their grand avoidance. They appear near the mountains sometimes. Fluffy, distant, and smug. Once, you see what looks like rain falling far off a beautiful column of mist dancing between 2 hills. You point it out to another shepherd. He squints, shrugs, and says, probably just the gods washing their hands. You nod. Because that's as reasonable an explanation as any, and as you walk back to your flock, dust clinging to your boots like an unpaid debt, you wonder not if it will rain, but whether rain still remembers your village exists. Because forgetting seems easier than mercy. You hear it before you believe it. A sound light, rhythmic, inconsistent, like 1,000 tiny feet pattering across thatched roofs and empty hopes. You sit up too fast and hit your head on the doorway beam again. But it doesn't matter, because the sound is still there. Rain. It has to be. What else could make a sound like that? You rush outside. You don't put on shoes. You don't even grab your cloak. You run barefoot, tunic flapping, heart pounding, like a church bell in a fire. The sky is grey, proper grey. Not white, not indifferent, but actively brooding. You want to weep from joy. You want to hug a goat. You want to throw your turnip soup into the wind and declare it a feast day. But then you realize something. It's not rain, it's beetles. Thousands of them, falling from the trees in some strange migration ritual that no one asked for. Beetles tumbling from brittle leaves onto rooftops, onto fields, onto you. One hits your cheek. Another skitters down your collar. You stand there, frozen, watching a beetle crawl across your sleeve like it owns the place. The sound you heard the gentle patter was insects. Not water, just legs. You go inside. You sit down. You reevaluate several life choices. False hope does something to you. It isn't just disappointing. It's personal. It whispers you were foolish to hope, then steals your last dry towel. You try to focus on something else. You sweep. You chop kindling. You count sheep not metaphorically, but literally, because one has gone missing again. You find it in your neighbour's cabbage patch, chewing with slow defiance, like a creature that knows the punishment is worth it. That night, the wind changes. You feel it first on your cheeks, cooler, sharper, scented with something unfamiliar. Not just dust, not just despair, but maybe possibility. You step outside. Above you, clouds are gathering, real ones this time. You stare at them like a man who just saw his lost spoon crawl back home. Then a drop. One. It lands on your nose. Cold. Miraculous. You close your eyes. You tilt your face upward. Then another. Then 3. And then the wind shifts again violently, abruptly, and the rain truly begins. Except it's not the rain you imagined. It's sharp. Aggressive. Less like a blessing and more like being gently stabbed by wet gravel. The first few seconds are glorious. Then it soaks through your tunic. Then your under tunic. Then your soul. It's cold. You shiver. You sneeze. You wonder if this is divine irony or just poor planning on the weather's part. Still, it's rain. The sheep are bewildered. One stands very still, blinking up at the clouds like it's trying to file a complaint. Another bolts into the bushes. The rest slowly, reluctantly, begin to chew again. You don't stop them. You let the rain soak you, because it's real, because it hurts a little, because even painful rain is better than silence. It rained. That part is true. And for a brief moment of blink in the life of the village, everything paused. The ground darkened, the dust quieted, and people stood still, faces tilted skyward, mouths slightly open, like flowers that forgot how to bloom but were willing to try again. Now it's the morning after, and everything is exactly the same, only wetter. Your boots squelch when you walk, not in a satisfying, life-giving way, but in the reluctant, mushy manner of overcooked vegetables or regretful pudding. The soil has turned into something between porridge and glue. Your sheep are standing in it with expressions that say, "This is worse than dust." You can't argue. Inside your hut, things are damp. Your blanket is damp. Your bread is damp. Even your thoughts feel slightly soggy. The rain didn't fix anything, it just moved the misery sideways. The well is still low. The fields are still cracked underneath their shallow disguise of mud. The cabbage that started to unfurl its leaves in celebration now lies limp, like a poet who ran out of metaphors. But the village is celebrating anyway. The priest calls it a miracle, a blessing. He says the clouds have been satisfied, the ritual successful, the sinners forgiven. He doesn't mention that the rain arrived a full 5 days after the ceremony and 3 days after everyone gave up and started blaming the chickens again. But no one's interested in timeline inconsistencies. They want hope. They want narrative. And if the sky gave them one, even belatedly, they'll take it. There's talk of a feast. Not a real one, no one has food for that, but a symbolic meal, which in this case means someone roasts a single turnip, and everyone takes turns pretending to smell it. You attend because it would be suspicious not to. You wear your less wet tunic. You sit by the communal fire, which now smokes more than it burns. The baker hands you half a crust, soggy on one end and charred on the other. You eat it anyway. Someone tells the story of how you shouted at the sky and summoned the clouds. You try to correct them, to say the rain came days later, but they've already moved on to the part where lightning struck in the distance. It didn't, and a bird landed on your shoulder. It did, briefly, but then pooped and left. You nod. You chew. You let them believe. After all, they need a story more than they need the truth. As evening sets in, the sky turns pink around the edges, like it's blushing from all the attention. A breeze dances through the trees, not hot, not cold, just there. For once, you don't feel like it's judging you. You walk back to your field. The sheep are sleeping in a pile, legs tangled, noses twitching. One twitches dramatically and kicks a stone. You smile, just a little. Tomorrow will be muddy, and then dry again, and then worse. But tonight, for a few hours, the air smells like something close to clean, almost gentle, like the sky remembered, just for a moment, that you were here. It starts, like many bad ideas, with a town meeting. The drought's been dragging on. Crops are brittle. Tempers are worse. Sumione's well dried up mid-ladle. The blacksmith refuses to hammer anything unless it's an umbrella, which no one has seen in 6 years. The priest has started muttering into his soup. You suspect it's just boiled rainwater with a floating turnip rind, but no one dares confirm. The mayor, who is technically a merchant who once owned 2 mules, and a promising beard, gathers everyone at the church square and clears his throat with the gravity of someone about to say something deeply unwise. He proposes a sky whipping. You blink. The idea, apparently, is that the heavens have become complacent, lazy, aloof, and what they need, what they deserve, is a firm reminder of their responsibilities. Through ropes, through shouting, through the ceremonial act of waving sticks at clouds that are not there, the town murmurs. A few people nod. A few more scratch their chins as if considering whether clouds respond better to thick rope or braided twine. You try to ask whether this has worked before. Someone says, "In the north." Someone else says, "I heard it in a song." You point out that songs aren't weather reports. You are ignored. So the preparations begin. They choose the hill just outside town, the one that's never grown anything but moss and rumours. It's steep, uneven, and just flat enough on top to accommodate 30 angry farmers and a few optimistic pigs. Ropes are gathered, not the sturdy kind used for hauling, but ceremonial ones dyed red, looped, and woven with dried herbs for added atmosphere. You're drafted, of course, not because you believe in it, not because you volunteered, but because you once shouted at a cloud and someone swore they saw it flinch. You regret that moment. You regret it deeply now. The morning of the event arrives with a sky so blank it could be parchment. You dress in your second best tunic because your first best smells like mildew and misplaced hope. Your boots squelch not from rain, but from yesterday's puddle of goat-related misfortune. You climb the hill. Others are already there. The ropes are coiled. The pigs have wandered off. A teenager is handing out bells made from bits of tin and string, as if noise might help. A woman, in a shawl, is drawing symbols in the dirt spirals, crosses, something that looks like a duck trying to do math. Then the mayor steps forward. He raises his arms. He calls out to the heavens. He begins the chant. It is long. It is loud. It rhymes poorly. You suspect it was written by someone who had a grudge against rhythm. Everyone joins in, some hesitantly, some with surprising enthusiasm. And then, at the signal, everyone whips their ropes toward the sky. You do it too, because you're there, because everyone's watching, because just maybe the clouds are listening. The first whip of rope slices upward, dramatic, fast, and completely ignored by the sky. You feel ridiculous. The rope, which was never particularly aerodynamic to begin with, flaps awkwardly before dropping like a stunned snake at your feet. You pick it up and try again, this time with a little more wrist, a little more flair. It still fails to touch the clouds, mostly because there are no clouds, just a wide, pale sky that watches with silent, celestial disinterest. Around you, the townsfolk are fully engaged in this group delusion. Some are whipping with furious energy, teeth clenched, as if the sky personally insulted their wheat. Others are swaying in time with the chant, eyes closed, rope waving more like a slow apology than a rebuke. The teenager with the tin bells rings them enthusiastically, producing a sound like startled spoons falling down a staircase. No one knows what to do after the third round. Do you stop? Wait? Bow? A few people just stand there, punting and holding their ropes like wilted sunflowers. One man keeps going, rope circling above his head like he's trying to lasso a ghost. You ask if there's a next step. The mayor says yes, stomping. And so, stomping, 30 adults plus a few disoriented sheep begin to march in uneven circles, pounding the ground in what is supposedly an ancient tradition, though no one can name the tradition, or where it came from, or if the sheep are supposed to be part of it. You stomp anyway. It feels like punishment for asking questions. Dust kicks up. Someone sneezes. Someone else declares they feel the wind shifting, though you're pretty sure it's just the breath of the old baker who wheezes when he walks uphill. The rope waving resumes, followed by more chanting, which by now has degraded into mumbles, wheezes, and the occasional shout of "come on then," directed skyward. Then comes the moment of silence. Planned? Accidental? No one knows. But suddenly everyone stops. The ropes droop. The bells still. The mayor lowers his arms. The pigs, who had returned only to roll in the ceremonial chalk markings, stop mid-squirm and stare with surprising judgment. Everyone waits. The wind holds its breath. A single leaf flutters past. It lands upside down on the mayor's shoe. He looks up. Nothing happens. No clouds. No thunder. No divine peal of laughter. Just a gently buzzing fly and the growing sound of embarrassed shuffling. A woman mutters that maybe the ropes weren't long enough. Another suggests the chant might have been in the wrong dialect. The baker quietly blames the teenager's bells. You remain still, clutching your rope like a man who just tried to scold the ocean. And then someone claps. One. Singular. Slow. It's the priest. Effort, he says, nodding. That's all he says. Everyone exhales, as if granted divine permission to stop pretending. You walk down the hill, rope trailing behind you like a lazy tail. Your shoulders ache, your pride feels lightly sortied, and your boots are filled with dust and regret. You try not to laugh. Because somehow, in the middle of the silliest moment of your life, you know one thing for sure: it still won't rain tomorrow. The next day arrives with the same oppressive dryness as the one before, as if the sky not only ignored your ceremony, but took notes and doubled down out of spite. You wake up sore. Your arms ache from the rope swinging, your calves from the uneven hill stomping, and your soul from the general weight of having participated in what history will likely label as the least effective sky scolding on record. You roll over in your straw-filled mattress, and it makes a sound like disappointment. The air smells like dust and mild embarrassment. You step outside. The sun is already smug. In town, no one talks about the failure. Instead, they talk around it, in the same way people do after a bad play where someone forgot their lines and someone else fell into the orchestra pit. They're not denying it happened, they're simply choosing to interpret it as a kind of success, a symbolic cleansing, a metaphysical realignment, a bold demonstration of faith. Pick a phrase. They all mean the same thing. Let's not feel foolish for yelling at clouds that weren't there. The mayor is particularly enthusiastic. He claims that although no rain came, the ceremony awoke the forces. When pressed, he cannot define what those forces are, what they were doing before, or how they were awakened. But he says it with enough confidence that people nod along. Confidence, it turns out, is more contagious than drought. The priest declares the ritual a good first step. First step toward what, he does not say. Someone asks if there will be a second step. He coughs and walks away. You pass Mira, the beekeeper. Her bees are still producing nothing but discontent. She looks at you as if you've personally insulted her hive's ambition. You didn't swing the rope high enough, she says without greeting. The clouds were probably just over the ridge. You consider responding. You don't. At the market, someone has started selling cloud charms, bits of string tied to feathers and dried beans. Hand-braided during the ceremony, the sign claims. Good for summoning, or at least distracting the sky. You watch as 3 people buy them. One tries to wear it like a necklace. Another dangles it in front of their pig. Later, while feeding your sheep, who seem more indifferent than usual, even for sheep, you overhear a new theory. A group of elders sitting on an overturned cart declare that the ritual failed because it lacked sincerity. There was too much muttering, says one. And the ropes should have been blessed. Another adds that someone they don't name names, but they all glance in your direction, was swinging clockwise, which obviously cancels out counterclockwise intentions. You decide to spend the afternoon on the ridge, away from opinions. You sit on a flat stone that's only slightly warm, stare at the sky, and try to believe in nothing. Not the ceremony, not the priest's optimism, not the charm sellers or the whispering bees, just the clouds. Eventually one appears, small, thin, unambitious. It floats past like someone who showed up late to a party, realized no one brought food, and left again without making eye contact. 2 days after the ritual, the rain still hasn't come, but something else has arrived: gossip. It trickles through the village faster than water, which is saying something these days. Whispers bounce from baker to shepherd, from cabbage patch to candlemaker, each one slightly more embellished than the last. You hear them as you pass through town, pretending you don't hear them, which only makes people whisper louder. Apparently there is now a growing belief that someone sabotaged the ritual. Not with malice, no, just with poor energy. Bad vibrations, one woman explains, while holding a jug of spoiled milk and glaring at your sandals. You don't know what that means. Neither does she, probably, but it sounds important. The scapegoating begins, and it's organized with the same haphazard precision as a goose-led parade. At first they accuse the bellboy his ringing was off rhythm. Then the mayor his chant lacked heart. Then the pigs they left the hill too early. And finally somehow you. He didn't shout with conviction, says a man who once fell asleep during his own wedding. You raise an eyebrow. He nods solemnly, as if that explains everything. The worst part isn't the blame. You're used to that. You've been blamed for things as varied as goat flu, sour cheese, and a surprisingly aggressive goose. The worst part is that people are starting to take sides, and with sides comes structure, and with structure comes something dangerously close to politics. A group begins meeting behind the blacksmith's shed. They call themselves the Weather Faithful. Their motto, someone says, is whip harder, believe more. Across the square, a rival group forms. They name themselves the Sky Realists. Their platform includes stopping all public rituals and focusing on practical things, like digging deeper wells and not insulting atmospheric phenomena. You try to stay neutral. You don't want to be involved. You're a shepherd. Your job is to keep your flock from chewing on poisons or wandering into someone's oven pit. But neutrality is not fashionable right now. Everyone wants you to take a side. Someone leaves a leaf-shaped brooch at your doorstep, a gift from the faithful. Later, someone else ties a skeptical-looking note to your goat, a warning from the realists. You consider hiding. You end up climbing the hill again, mostly out of habit. The chalk symbols have faded. The ropes are gone. Only the rocks remain, vaguely judgmental and thoroughly unmoved. You sit. The wind picks up slightly, just enough to move your hair and stir your pessimism. Looking up, you try to guess what the clouds might think if they could think, if they cared, if they tuned in to hilltop rituals like bored gods browsing a celestial market. Then again, maybe they do notice, and maybe they're just waiting. Because sometimes you suspect the weather doesn't respond to rope or ritual or rhyme. It just enjoys watching humans make fools of themselves. On the 6th day after the sky whipping, just as people start getting used to the idea that perhaps nothing will ever fall from the heavens again, except dust and regret, a stranger arrives. He doesn't ride a horse. He doesn't wear boots. He arrives barefoot, with a stick taller than himself, wrapped in blue cloth and bells. Not ceremonial bells like the boy had, real ones. Tarnished bronze, slightly mismatched, but clearly chosen with care. They make no music when he walks, just a dry, tired rattle. Like someone trying to summon thunder with a box of spoons. He introduces himself as Rain Prophet Huron, a name no one questions because it sounds official and vaguely dramatic. The mayor greets him immediately, as if they've known each other for years, despite having clearly just met. He's been expected, the mayor announces to the crowd that forms in seconds. No one remembers expecting him, but they don't say so. You, of course, keep your distance. The prophet is older than you'd guessed. Skin like folded parchment. Hair like a wind-blown haystack that gave up halfway through styling. He carries a pouch of dried herbs, a vial of something that might be oil or vinegar, and a gaze that seems to measure people like one would measure a misbehaving apple. When he speaks, he does so slowly, as if consulting an internal scroll written in riddles. I felt the dryness from across the valley, he says. Someone gasps, probably the blacksmith's wife. She gasps professionally. I've come to observe your sky, to read its silence. A few people nod, despite not knowing what that means. One man offers him a stool. The prophet declines and instead walks to the center of the square, plants his stick into the dry earth, and sits beside it, legs crossed. He begins humming. You blink. You blink again. You keep blinking, hoping this is just an unusually theatrical nap. But no, this is apparently his process. The mayor stands beside him with the expression of someone deeply invested in a pot of water that refuses to boil. By afternoon, people have started bringing offerings. A handful of grain, a spoon carved from driftwood. One child places a single beet at his feet and whispers, "For the sky's tongue." No one knows what that means. No one asks. It sounds spiritual enough to pass inspection. By evening, the square smells like burnt sage, hopeful sweat, and goat. The rain prophet has not moved. The faithful are thrilled. They believe this is confirmation, that the ceremony opened a path for this divine messenger. The realists remain unconvinced. He's just tired, someone mutters. Sitting isn't a ritual. It's what people do when they don't know what to do next. You sit on a crate and eat something that used to be soup. It tastes like memory and boiled disbelief. A boy walks by with a flower crown and a painted cloud on his cheek. His dog has the same symbol. You don't ask questions anymore. The sky remains blank, but now it has an audience. And that, apparently, is something worth watching. By the next morning, Rain Prophet Huron is still sitting. Same place, same stick, same expression of meditative constipation. You check for signs of movement, blinking, breathing, perhaps a discreet nose scratch, but he remains as still as a monument to indecision. A chicken pecks near his knee. He does not react. The chicken eventually leaves, looking vaguely unnerved. The village is divided on what this means. Some believe he's communing with the sky. Others believe he's asleep with dignity. The priest insists this is a test of collective patience. The baker thinks he's dehydrated and possibly dead. You're not sure. You once watched a snail make more progress in an hour than this prophet has made in a day. Still, you can't look away. No one can. A bench has been moved into the square. It's not for him, it's for spectators. You count at least 12 people sitting, arms crossed, watching him as if something might suddenly happen. It won't, of course, but the not happening has become the main event. The mayor declares a sky vigil. Volunteers will sit in rotating shifts, watching the sky and the prophet. Someone makes a schedule. Someone else brings pastries. By noon, the vigil has snacks, a songbook, and a rotating candle altar that spins if you push it just right. The child decorates the prophet's stick with flower petals. He still doesn't move. You go about your day. You trim a sheep's hoof badly. You spill water on your only clean tunic and pretend it's an intentional dye pattern. You try to patch the corner of your roof using dried moss and mild threats. None of it works, but the effort feels respectable. Meanwhile, in the square, a teenager plays a flute near the prophet's ear. It sounds like two ducks arguing. The prophet doesn't blink. Later that afternoon, something almost happens. A breeze. Just a small one. Enough to rustle someone's hair and set a single leaf in motion. The leaf flutters dramatically, circles once, then lands on the prophet's shoulder. A collective gasp echoes across the square. He doesn't react. The leaf slides off. Someone says, "It's a sign." Someone else says, "It's just wind." A third person insists that if we all breathe in unison, the sky will understand our longing. A fourth suggests fewer vegetables and more direct sky threats. The debate escalates. Tensions rise. A bread roll is thrown. It misses its target and hits a goat. The goat is unimpressed. You sit on the edge of a fountain that's been dry for so long it now houses a thriving community of ants and lost buttons. You sip lukewarm tea and think about the concept of momentum, how a single pebble can start a landslide, but also how sometimes a whole village, despite all its prayers and ropes and prophets, can sit still for days and still have nothing to show for it but crumbs, sunburn, and the vague belief that something is probably coming. The sky, for its part, continues doing what it does best. Absolutely nothing. On the seventh day, Rain Prophet Huron speaks. It happens without warning, in the middle of someone's third flute solo, and just after a young couple begins painting what they believe is a symbolic mural of sky emotions on the side of the bakery. His voice cuts through the square like a dry twig snapping in a silent church. "The sky has spoken," he says. Everyone freezes. Someone drops a spoon. Someone else gasps so dramatically they pull a muscle. The muralists stop mid-stroke, blue paint dripping from the corner of a very confused sun. You wait. The silence stretches long enough for the goat to sneeze twice and for someone to say shush 3 separate times. The prophet stands slowly, joints cracking like kindling, and points at the horizon. "In 2 days," he says, "the sky will soften." Then he sits back down, resumes humming, and closes his eyes. That's it. That's the whole prophecy. You blink. You were hoping for more, perhaps details, or instructions, or at least a clarification of what soften means. Will it rain? Drizzle? Will the sun melt slightly at the corners and roll behind a hill in embarrassment? No one knows. No one asks. Because now the town has something far more dangerous than uncertainty. It has a date. 2 days. The news spreads faster than fungus in a monk's boot. People begin preparations. Some start cleaning their roofs, just in case the rain wants somewhere nice to land. Others bake small bread figures shaped like clouds. One man builds a wooden bowl large enough to catch a goat, just in case the sky drops anything unexpected. The faithful declare this confirmation of their methods. The realists declare that even a broken sundial is right twice a day. A third group, newly formed, mildly chaotic, calls itself the Softeners. Their motto is, "If it's coming nicely." No one knows what that means. It's printed on ribbons anyway. The mayor organizes a softening festival. Not officially, of course, it's labeled a community readiness initiative, but it features music, bread brainshare. The winning guesser receives a turnip carved into the shape of a mildly concerned cloud. You do not participate. You feed your sheep, who remain perfectly unaware that prophecy has once again rearranged the village's sanity. One of them tries to eat a cloud-shaped bun someone left on your fence. You rescue it, out of principle, then accidentally eat it later out of boredom. It tastes like flour and unresolved expectations. That night you lie awake, listening to the creak of your roof beams and the soft whisper of nothing happening. You picture the sky, lounging far above, utterly untouched by rope, flute, or prophecy. You wonder if it's laughing, not cruelly, just politely. Like someone who heard a joke but didn't quite understand it, yet wants to encourage the effort. 2 days, they said. You sigh. That's practically tomorrow. Day 1 of the prophecy arrives with no changes except in people's posture. The villagers have begun looking upward with the obsessive intensity of gamblers watching dice roll in slow motion. Heads tilt. Eyes squint. Necks crane at painful angles. If clouds were summoned by sheer attention, the sky would be drowning by now. But instead, it remains defiantly blank, not the angry blankness of a storm, not even the pouting blankness of a grey drizzle, just plain, passive, lightly toasted beige. You try to go about your business, but it's difficult when everyone you pass tries to involve you in their personal interpretation of what soften might mean. One man says the sky feels looser. Another claims the breeze is less judgmental. A child insists the clouds are hiding behind a mountain and will peek out if we all shout compliments at once. Someone actually tries this. The compliments are shouted. The clouds remain firmly unbothered. The rain prophet continues sitting. He's moved slightly at some point. Someone gave him a cushion, and now he hums on top of it like a particularly dusty kettle. The priest sits near him, eyes closed, possibly praying, possibly asleep. The mayor walks in circles nearby, pretending to supervise the horizon. And then the charts begin. The scribe, who up until now has only ever recorded turnip taxes and public pig disputes, produces a large piece of parchment titled Observable Atmospheric Variations. It contains sketches of clouds that aren't there, notes on humidity that doesn't exist, and a list of bird behaviors that seem suspiciously fabricated. A footnote reads, "If the sky frowns, it may mean agreement." You observe the sky. It does not frown. It does not smile. It does not move. You climb the hill again, not because you expect anything to happen, but because it's quieter up there. The wind is a little stronger, though still dry. You sit on a rock that has become your unofficial thinking place, flat, warm, shaped vaguely like a sleeping cat. The village below bustles with softening-related optimism. You close your eyes and count breaths. The sheep follow you up. Slowly, not out of loyalty, but because they're convinced you have snacks. You don't. One of them bleats at your elbow anyway. You pat its head and sigh. By evening, someone claims to have seen a ripple in the clouds. Everyone rushes to look. The ripple turns out to be smoke from the baker's chimney, but no one admits this. They simply nod and call it a precursor. Every miracle starts as a misunderstanding, someone declares, to approving murmurs. You return home. Your tunic smells like sun. Your hands smell like wool. Your hopes smell like damp clay that never quite became a pot. You light a candle. You sit on your stool. You wait, just in case the sky was planning something. It doesn't. But everyone agrees it felt closer today, which, of course, means nothing. But still you almost believe it. On the second day, the day of the prophecy, the sky changes. Not dramatically. Not like curtains parting or divine horns sounding across the valley. No. It's quieter than that, just a slight thickening. A pale smudge on the horizon, like someone rubbed a greasy thumb across the heavens. But in a town starved of miracles, even a smudge feels like thunder. The mayor is first to announce it. It begins, he says, pointing at nothing in particular. People cheer. Not loud, but with that restrained giddiness usually reserved for weddings involving bread or a goat finally learning not to kick the bucket during milking. You look up. Yes, the sky is different. Barely. Just enough to fool the hopeful and irritate the skeptics. The faithful burst into hymn. The realists begin muttering about atmospheric illusions. The softeners bring out a banner they finished at dawn, a long piece of linen that reads, "Here it comes, maybe." You go to your field. Not out of ritual, but because your sheep are there, and someone needs to stop them from eating the fence again. The air feels moist adjacent. Not wet. Not promising. Just the kind of air that makes you think about dampness without delivering any. You sit on your usual rock and wait. Around mid-morning it happens. One drop. Just one. It lands on your wrist, cold, tiny, insincere. You blink. You wait. Another comes. And then a third. You hold your breath. Then the drizzle begins. Not a rain. Not even a shower. Just a fine mist, more suggestion than substance, barely heavy enough to annoy a gnat. But it's real. Technically it is precipitation. Technically, the prophecy is fulfilled. Back in town, the response is immediate and absurd. Children scream with joy. Adults lift their hands skyward, as if about to be lifted into the air. Someone falls to their knees in the square and declares the soil forgiven. A bell rings. Then two. Then far too many. You wince. The rain prophet opens one eye, nods once, and closes it again like a man clocking out for the week. But the drizzle doesn't last. It tapers off within minutes, not slowly, but with the abruptness of a song ending mid-note. The sky lightens. The breeze shifts. And just like that, it's over. A sigh disguised as a weather event. The baker says, well, that was polite of it. The priest calls it a beginning. The scribe tries to record the size of the droplets but ends up with the parchment covered in tiny wet spots and a mild headache. You stand. Your sleeve is a little damp. Your feet are still dry. The sheep look unimpressed. One sneezes, steps in a puddle the size of a spoon, and bleats as if insulted. You walk home slowly, unsure if you should feel cheated or fulfilled, because maybe, just maybe, the prophecy was right. The sky did soften. It just didn't care enough to stay that way. The next morning, everything smells faintly of false hope. Not that things smell particularly different, it's still dust sheep, and the occasional whiff of something suspicious near the communal compost, but there's a new undertone now, a scent like wet parchment or optimism left out in the sun. The kind of smell that reminds you of promises barely kept and celebrations thrown just a little too early. The town pretends to be satisfied. The drizzle is spoken of reverently. It was subtle, someone says. It was intentional, says another. The priest declares it a divine whisper. You think it was more like a polite cough from a sky that didn't want to be rude. But you don't say that out loud. Not after what happened with the bun joke. There's a picnic planned. Not because there's food there isn't, but because the mayor insists community spirit must remain moist, even if the soil doesn't. No one knows what that means, but they nod anyway, and begin arranging rocks into benches. Someone spreads out a cloth. It's not really a picnic blanket, just a curtain with a suspicious stain, but the mood is festive enough to forgive it. You bring a turnip. Not because you want to share, but because it's your least inspiring one, and you're hoping someone will trade you for something that isn't beige and fibrous. They don't. Instead, they praise its symmetry and take turns pretending to smell it. Meanwhile, Rain Prophet Huron stands up. For the first time in days, he speaks again. His voice is hoarse, probably from prolonged dramatic silence. The sky has acknowledged your efforts, he says, and now I must follow the clouds. He gestures east. There are no clouds in the east. There's barely even a sky. Just a pale stretch of light that looks like it gave up trying to be blue. No one questions him. They offer him bread, a walking stick, and a blessing that sounds vaguely improvised. He accepts the bread, ignores the stick, and nods solemnly at the blessing. Then he walks, slowly, deliberately, with just enough flair to make his departure feel important. One of the pigs follows him for a while, then gets distracted by a beetle and wanders off. After he leaves, there's a moment of collective silence. Then someone claps. Then everyone claps. You sit on the rock you always sit on. Your sheep are nearby, chewing things that may or may not be edible. The sky remains passive, not blank, just indifferent. You think about all that has happened, the ropes, the chanting, the sky whipping, the silent sitting, the softly anticipated miracle. And you realize something quietly hilarious. Nothing really changed. But somehow, the town feels better. Not wetter. Not wiser. Just slightly more convinced that maybe, next time, things will make more sense. You chew a corner of your turnip, realize again why you dislike it, and throw it toward the compost. It bounces once, hits a rock, and is promptly stolen by a goat who looks you in the eye like it knows exactly what it's done. The sky doesn't respond, but the breeze, just for a second, feels like it might have watched the whole thing and shrugged. It begins, as these things often do, with a stone. Not a sacred one, not carved or marked or glowing with divine light, just a lump of rock, roundish, greyish, and perfectly unremarkable in every way. It sits in the middle of a Galician village square, next to the well, opposite the bakery, and only slightly in the way of passing goats. Most people ignore it. You would too. But this stone has a reputation. According to the locals, it sweats before storms. You arrive in the village on a dry afternoon, the kind where the dust has stopped bothering to rise and just lies flat across the earth like it's giving up. Your shoes are already coated in resignation. You're handed a cup of lukewarm cider by a man whose face looks permanently squinted. He nods once at the stone and says, without irony, she'll speak before the rain does. You are naturally skeptical. The stone does not look wise. It looks bored, possibly tired. It has moss in one armpit and a suspicious dark streak that could be anything from soot to pigeon-related disaster. And yet, everyone here treats it like a small geological grandmother, revered, slightly feared, consulted often. You ask someone, a woman shelling peas, how this began. She shrugs and tells you it's always been this way. Her grandmother listened to the stone. So did her mother. So does she. The weather talks through rock, she says. Water comes when she sweats. You point out that it might just be condensation. She frowns. So does the baker, she replies. But no one listens to him. Fair enough. You set up camp near the edge of the village, under a lopsided tree that offers more opinion than shade. From your angle, you can see the stone clearly. It does not appear to be doing anything. The sky is a clear pale blue, not dramatic, not ominous. Just a colour you'd expect on a handkerchief no one has used yet. The breeze is lazy. The air smells like cider and distant turnips. The stone remains dry. Over dinner, a stew with too many onions, and not enough a reason, you ask again. Has the stone ever been wrong? People avoid your gaze. Someone mentions the time it didn't sweat, but it turned out the well was leaking. Another says the stone predicted a hailstorm, and only a single piece of ice fell directly into the priest's soup. He took it as a sign. You take it as anecdotal exaggeration. Still, you wait. Because that's what people do here. They don't check clouds. They don't sniff the wind. They don't ask the birds. They wait for the stone. And when it sweats, if it sweats, they carry their laundry indoors, close their shutters, and mutter things like, "She warned us," as if weather were a neighbour with strong opinions and excellent timing. You lie back, watching the sky for signs. It offers nothing. Not even a breeze. But in the centre of the square, surrounded by carts, benches, and idle suspicion, the stone waits too. And maybe, just maybe, she knows something you don't. The second day in the village begins with porridge and silence. You sit on a wooden stool that leans slightly to the left, staring at your bowl, which steams gently as if it's thinking about something too complicated to say out loud. The porridge tastes like texture. Warm, beige texture. There are a few raisins inside, possibly added for optimism. but they mostly look like regrets that didn't soak long enough. You eat slowly, because there's nothing to rush for. The baker rings his little bell around the square to announce that bread exists. No one moves faster because of it. Movement here happens the way clouds do, slow, inconsistent, and often misinterpreted. Across the square, the stone is still dry. A boy walks up to it, stares for a moment, and places a walnut on top. His grandmother yells at him to stop wasting offerings. He yells back that it's a gift, not an offering. She says the stone prefers almonds. He says almonds are expensive. A compromise is not reached. The walnut stays. The air feels a little heavier today, though that might just be your imagination after hearing someone say the weight of the sky has shifted. It hasn't, obviously, but after the third time you hear it, you start squinting upward, wondering if the clouds are fatter or just slouching. You ask a woman sweeping her doorway if she believes in the stone. She pauses, broom mid-air, and says, "You don't question furniture that keeps the house together." Then she goes back to sweeping, as if she didn't just casually describe a rock as a meteorological support beam. By mid-morning, the square has developed a routine. A group of men sit on benches, arguing about whether the stone's left side looks darker. They agree to disagree, then disagree again. One brings out a damp cloth and tries to clean it for clarity. Another hisses that cleaning it interferes with divine secretion. A third just hums and eats pickled carrots. You sit by the well and try to observe objectively. The stone, from this angle, looks indifferent, maybe a little annoyed. It's not doing anything. It's very good at not doing anything. It might be the best at it, but still everyone watches. The stone has become the village's main attraction. Tourists would come if the road weren't so terrible and the inn didn't smell like feet and goat cheese having an argument. There's talk of painting a small sign, Sacred Stone of Sweats. Someone suggests making it rhyme. Someone else suggests charging for views. Everyone agrees this would offend the rock, which must never be commercialized, only stared at, fed walnuts, and whispered to occasionally. Afternoon stretches out like dough that doesn't want to become bread. The sky remains unbothered. The air, if anything, has grown more tired. A fly circles your head exactly 13 times. You count. Nothing happens. And still, the stone doesn't sweat, but no one calls it wrong. Not yet. The third day begins with urgency. Not because something has happened, nothing ever does. Not quickly, but because someone claims they saw a glisten. Just a faint sheen, they say, right at sunrise, just under the curve of the stone's left side. The news spreads faster than fire through dry hay, except the hay here is metaphorical, and also slightly damp with gossip. You finish your morning cider too fast and immediately regret it. Now your mouth feels like someone stirred it with a warm spoon. You set the cup down, grab your satchel, and hurry to the square or word that suggests shape and order, though this one is more like an open suggestion, surrounded by mismatched buildings and people pretending to be purposeful. The crowd has already formed. Half the village, and at least one goat, are gathered around the stone. No one touches it. That's a rule. But everyone leans in as close as reverence allows, eyes narrowed, lips pursed, heads tilting from side to side like confused pigeons trying to solve a riddle in limestone. You look too. It's hard to tell. The surface is uneven, weathered. One side looks slightly darker than yesterday, but that could be shadow or soot or someone breathing too enthusiastically nearby. You ask if anyone touched it. Gasps. Absolutely not. The stone must sweat naturally. Induced moisture is sacrilege. It must come from the inside like honesty or soup flavor. The priest arrives with a small mirror, presumably to reflect divine confirmation, or just to check for forehead oil. He holds it low to the ground, angles it carefully, squints, adjusts, sighs. Possibly dew, he says. The baker disagrees. It's sweat, he insists. I saw it forming. I saw a bead roll. He mimes a slow descent with his finger. It's not convincing. Someone counters that he once mistook a shadow for a loaf, and we shouldn't trust his vision when it's emotional. A new voice enters. A child, the same one with the walnut now, claims the stone whispered to him in a dream. She said the storm is sleeping, he explains, but she feels it turning. Everyone nods. It makes no sense, but it feels like a poem, so it's accepted without edits. The air is heavier than yesterday, not hot but tense, like it's holding a conversation just out of earshot. You sit on the edge of the well again, hands resting in your lap, back straight, eyes on the stone. You wait for a drop, just one. A single, irrefutable bead of stone sweat would be enough to justify everything: the staring, the debates, the half-eaten pickled carrots. The stone doesn't budge. A fly lands on it, walks in a perfect spiral, then leaves. This becomes a point of discussion. The fly knows, someone says. Flies sense pressure systems. You try to point out that flies also land on manure. Your comment is ignored. By sundown, no moisture has been confirmed, but no moisture has been denied either. So, in the absence of evidence, everyone agrees on the most satisfying conclusion possible. She's thinking about it. By the fourth morning, the stone still hasn't done anything that would hold up in a court of meteorological law, but that hasn't stopped the village from scheduling an emergency council. It's not a formal meeting, exactly. No scrolls, no agendas. Just a circle of chairs hastily dragged into the square, arranged around the stone like it's the guest of honor at a birthday party that everyone forgot to bring gifts to. You arrive mid-setup, greeted by a mixture of hopeful nods and narrowed eyes that say, "You haven't contributed yet, have you?" You haven't. You sit anyway. The baker speaks first. "Yesterday at sunset," he says solemnly, "I saw 3 beads of moisture. Not 1. Not 2. 3. He raises 3 fingers unnecessarily. Someone claps. Someone else sneezes, which is taken as a bad omen by at least 2 people and ignored by the rest. The priest counters. Condensation. Localized. Could be ambient. The stone reflects the spirit of the air. Yes, but the air was indecisive. A silence falls. Everyone turns to the woman who usually settles arguments, the one with the particularly straight posture and the ability to shuck peas faster than most people can blink. She squints at the stone, squints at the sky, and says she's hesitating. The phrase spreads like spilled flour. "She's hesitating," the baker repeats. "Hesitating," says the child with the walnut, who has now returned with a painted pebble he claims is the stone's child. The term becomes the council's conclusion. Not wrong, not right, just in limbo. The stone, like the weather itself, is apparently wrestling with its choices. You look at the rock. It continues to sit there, unmoved, unsweating, completely unaware that it is now the most emotionally complex object in a 5-mile radius. You excuse yourself from the circle and wander behind the well, hoping for clarity, or at least fewer interpretations. The breeze today is barely moving, as if trying not to get involved. A rooster crows with surprising volume for a bird that hasn't laid a single egg in months. You find a bench 1 leg shorter than the rest and sit diagonally on purpose just to keep it from wobbling. Later in the afternoon, the council resumes, now with diagrams. Someone's drawn a series of moisture symbols on a plank of wood: small dot for a glisten, medium dot for a confirmed bead, large dot with a halo for a full sweat event. The board is leaned against a barrel and studied as if it contains sacred geometry. A debate ensues over whether dew counts if it's on the northeast quadrant. No one has a compass, so they use shadows and loudness of birds as indicators. You quietly eat a pear that tastes like compromise and listen to the conversation spiral. Eventually, someone proposes a name for the current phase. They call it the leaning toward moisture period. It's printed on a scrap of parchment and nailed to a nearby post with great ceremony. The stone still does nothing, but now, at least, it has context. The 5th morning begins with a noise. Not thunder, not the clap of a storm approaching with drama and orchestral flair. Just a soft shout, the kind of shout a person makes when they've discovered something between a miracle and a mildly damp surprise. You spill a bit of your porridge, which today includes exactly 1 chopped fig and the flavour of mild panic, and you jog toward the square with a piece of toast still in your mouth like a confused messenger pigeon. A crowd is already there. A dense, leaning, murmuring crowd. all pointed toward the stone like sunflowers straining to face an indecisive sun. You squeeze through legs and elbows and a dog with too many opinions, and you see it the shimmer. A faint, honest to weather glisten. The stone is wet, not soaked, not dripping, but clearly damp. It glistens on one side, a modest patch about the size of a chicken egg. People are in awe. One woman is crying. Another is taking notes in a book labeled Stone Responses, Year 14. The baker drops to his knees and whispers something that rhymes suspiciously with sweat and debt. The priest clutches a handkerchief and calls it an omen of transformation. You reach out carefully, reverently, and place your hand just near the moist area. You don't touch it. That would be blasphemy. But the air near it does feel cooler. Or maybe that's just nerves. Or imagination. Or the cumulative effect of 60 people holding their breath at once. There's no doubt this time. It's not shadow. It's not a prank. The stone has, undeniably, produced moisture. Celebrations begin in slow, confused waves. Someone opens a bottle of elderflower wine. Someone else begins humming a song that may or may not be about puddles. The child with the walnut throws it joyfully into the air. It hits a chicken. The chicken squawks, then struts away, offended but not traumatized. The mayor arrives late, sees the sweat, and immediately declares the beginning of the Great Drip Festival. No one expected this term. No one especially likes it, but it's repeated quickly and without resistance. Banners are discussed. So is a ceremonial mop. By midday, someone brings a bowl to catch further droplets. Another begins carving a replica of the glistening wood for future generations. You sit on a crate, sipping tepid cider, watching it all unfold with the calmness of someone who has already prepared themselves for either divine revelation or mild mold. And the stone? It remains exactly as it was, silent, grey, slightly misshapen, and now slightly damp. No rain has come. The sky hasn't shifted. The air is still heavy with promise but empty of action. But the stone has sweated. And in this village, that means everything. You glance up at the clouds, if they can still be called that. They hover like uncertain thoughts, not quite gathering, not quite dispersing. You squint. One might be moving. Maybe. But then again, maybe it's just you, breathing too hopefully. The stone has sweated. That part is no longer up for debate. But now comes the more delicate matter, what to do with that fact. You return to the square the next morning, a stale bun in one hand, and the knowledge that you slept only half as much as you'd hoped. The town is humming. Not literally, though there is someone near the bread stall whistling what might be a hymn or just a slow, wheezy exhale. The air smells like damp dirt and self-satisfaction. People walk taller, speak louder, and behave as if they personally encourage the stone to perspire through sheer will and moral superiority. The baker now calls himself he who witnessed the drop. It's unclear whether he's joking. He's begun baking loaves in the shape of the sweat mark oblong, slightly curved, featuring a decorative slit that he insists symbolizes divine release. You buy one out of politeness. It tastes like dry sermon and a hint of coriander. The mayor has appointed a moisture keeper, a young man with large hands and even larger enthusiasm, whose job is to record the stone's behavior hourly using a dampness scale carved into a stick. He reports at regular intervals. Still damp, he says, holding steady. The priest nods each time like he's solving a mystery, though the mystery appears to be how long can this excitement last before we realize we're still dry. Because of course no rain has come. The stone sweated. Yes, it glistened. Absolutely. But the sky. The sky remains stubborn, distant, and uninterested. Not hostile, just bored. It's like a monarch who agreed to wave once from a balcony and now refuses to acknowledge the crowd beneath. You overhear new theories. Someone says the stone sweats as a warning, not a promise. Another says the sweat is a spiritual test. If you believe hard enough, the rain will follow. A third insists that the moisture was not sweat at all, but a form of geological sympathy. You try to ask what that means, but the speaker mutters something about emotionally sensitive quartz and walks away. And so, the villagers wait. But it's a different kind of waiting now, less hopeful, more performative. Every minor shift in air pressure becomes a conversation. Every passing bird is analysed for sky-related motives. The moisture keeper adjusts his stick 3 times, despite there being no visible change. You begin to wonder if the stone will now be expected to sweat on command. By sunset, the sheen is nearly gone. Some claim it's evaporated truth. Others claim the stone is resting. A few children try to sing to it, their voices high and off-key, accompanied by an upside-down bucket being used as a drum. The sound makes a dog howl. The priest blesses the dog for its spiritual sensitivity. You sit quietly on your usual crate, chew a second bun, this one slightly less symbolic, and stare at the stone. It doesn't shimmer anymore. It just sits, solid and silent, surrounded by people who desperately want it to matter. And somehow it does. Even now, even as the sky forgets to follow through. The 7th day is declared a holy day, or at least something very close to its sweat remembrance. The mayor calls it, standing on a small overturned bucket, as if that lends him more legitimacy. No one knows exactly what they're supposed to remember, since it only happened 2 days ago and was in total about the size of a thumbprint, but remembering things is easier than waiting for new ones. The moisture keeper now wears a sash. No one gave it to him. He made it himself out of curtain scraps and embroidered it with 2 words, Stone Observer. The stitching is crooked. The pride is not. He walks around the square taking extremely detailed notes, most of which seem to say no change in increasingly elaborate calligraphy. You find this impressive, if not helpful. The stone remains dry, but the village, having tasted the thrill of mildly damp prophecy, refuses to give up. Now, it's no longer about watching. It's about preparation. They polish the stone, gently, with cloth soaked in goat's milk and superstition. They sing to it in the morning slow, meandering tunes that sound like someone trying to remember a lullaby underwater. One child performs a short dance involving arm flaps and a sprig of rosemary. The stone doesn't respond, but someone nearby claims they felt a coolness. A new theory emerges. Perhaps the stone is shy. Not unwilling, just bashful. Touched too directly by expectation, it retreats. It needs emotional space, someone says seriously, while placing a respectful 5-foot barrier of pebbles around it. Another suggests that eye contact should be limited. A woven screen is erected, and villagers now peek at the rock from behind it, whispering their hopes through the gaps like nervous suitors. You try to stay out of it. You really do. But the energy is magnetic, that odd blend of conviction, groupthink, and lingering boredom that drives people to assign meaning to anything. You find yourself staring too long at the sky, wondering if that slight smudge near the horizon is the beginning of a cloud, or just your eyelids getting tired. A bee lands on the stone. It sits there for a while. Someone claps. By midday, people start drawing their own moisture maps. One depicts a possible future sweat pattern shaped like a crescent moon. Another shows concentric circles radiating from a central point, labelled Initial Glimmer. You ask what it's based on. A dream, the artist says. You nod. You've stopped asking follow-up questions. That only encourages expansion. You eat your lunch by the well-stale bread with a side of crumb regret. The sky remains passive, a bland canopy of unmoved indifference. But the village? The village is electric with interpretation. Every ant trail is a symbol. Every creak of wood is a possible omen. Someone claims the water bucket echoed when dropped. Another swears their hair feels stormy. The stone, in all this, does what it has always done best. Absolutely nothing. And in doing so, it continues to be everything. By the 8th day, the stone has not sweated again. This is now referred to as the silence, which sounds more ominous than it is. In practice, it just means everyone keeps talking around the stone, but refuses to admit they're slightly disappointed. You eat a breakfast that consists of cold lentils and a piece of bread that could legally qualify as masonry. Your jaw aches halfway through. The bread doesn't mind. It never does. The mayor suggests holding a forum not to debate whether the stone is still sacred. That would be heresy, but to discuss whether we have become unworthy. Perhaps we celebrated too loudly, he says. Perhaps we demanded too much. The priest agrees, then mutters something about spiritual perspiration and walks away before anyone can ask follow-up questions. A few villagers have begun trying more direct methods. One man tries threatening the sky. He climbs onto a cart, raises a rusty pitchfork, and yells at the clouds. "We are ready." He shouts, "You can't dangle sweat and then ghost us." The sky, as always, remains impressively indifferent. A cloud passes not quickly, not slowly, just neutrally, and offers no comment. The man steps down, satisfied that he has shaken the heavens, and goes to drink something fermented behind the graisserie. You find the stone particularly lifeless today. Not just dry as its default, but uninterested. It has that slumped, matte finish that rocks sometimes get when they've given up being symbolic. Someone tries to polish it again, but a dog growls and they take it as a warning. The polishing is abandoned. The stone is clearly setting boundaries now. A child brings a sheep to comfort her. No one corrects the gender assumption. The sheep looks unsure, then promptly defecates near the edge of the rock's pedestal. This is interpreted as an omen of grounding. You are not sure what that means. Neither is the child. But someone sketches it on a parchment labelled Stone Mood Journal. Mid-afternoon, a travelling tinker arrives. He's dusty, thin, and smells faintly of roasted garlic and long roads. He eyes the crowd, eyes the stone, and says, "Ah, one of those villages." He sets up a small table to sell mirrors, wind chimes, and tiny cloth bags filled with blessed sky salt. No one asks where the salt came from. The word sky is enough. You overhear a conversation about building a second stone. "A backup," someone says, "in case this one becomes proud." Another insists it's dangerous to divide belief. "The sky prefers a single channel," she says, "like a rooster. Too many voices and it gets confused." You decide not to unpack that sentence. By evening, the stone is once again the center of silent attention. People stand around it with their hands clasped, brows furrowed, watching as if dryness were a riddle they could solve by wishing harder. You sit nearby, carving meaningless shapes into a leftover crust. The sheep from earlier wanders by, sniffs your boot, and then decides you're unimportant. You look up. The stars are beginning to appear, poking through the dusk one by one, like bored audience, members wondering if the play is ever going to start. By the 9th day, the stone is still dry, aggressively so, like it's making a point. But that doesn't stop the villagers from seeing signs. In fact, it seems to encourage them. With the stone uncooperative, the rest of the world becomes suspiciously symbolic. A leaf falls near the stone. Not on it, just near. It spins once in the air, lands gently beside a pebble, and comes to rest like a weary actor who just finished their one line. Someone gasps. "That's it," they whisper. "She's calling again." You blink slowly and chew your breakfast of biscuit that tastes like salted sandpaper while watching the crowd gather. The leaf is now being inspected by 5 people, one of whom insists it's shaped like a raindrop if you squint sideways. The moisture keeper sketches it immediately. A second parchment is brought out for cross-reference with past leaf events. The conclusion, consistent with previous omens. You do not speak. You just finish your biscuit and wonder if sanity has a moisture content, and if it's also evaporating. Someone suggests reading the wind. A woman with hair like a haystack wrapped in defiance begins holding strips of cloth in the air to track sky currents. One points west. Another goes limp. A third, caught in a gust, wraps around her neck and is declared a divine embrace. She almost chokes. The cloth is blessed and added to the shrine. You notice the shrine has grown. What began as a small pile of walnuts, feathers, and ambiguous stones is now a 3-tiered altar with candles, drawings, and something that might be an old shoe but is now considered weather-repellent footwear of the ancients. You ask who decided that. No one knows. It's just accepted. Like turnips being disappointing. The priest announces that he's had a dream. "The stone," he says, "spoke to me in the voice of thunder and told me we must be patient, for she is sweating internally." The phrase "internal sweat" is immediately added to the village glossary. A child writes it in chalk on a fence. You stare at it too long and forget what normal language sounds like. Someone brings a goat to bow before the shrine. The goat resists, as goats do. It refuses to kneel, refuses to face the stone, and eventually lies down in a posture of complete disdain. The villagers agree this is a message. The storm resists because we are not humble enough, someone says. A suggestion is made to perform a cleansing not of the stone, but of the village. Buckets are filled. A few houses are lightly splashed. One person demands a full dunking and is promptly ignored. You retreat to your usual bench by the dry well. The wind is mild today, the sun lazy, the sky painted with that same off-white hue that refuses to commit to anything. You feel like you're living in a season that hasn't decided whether to start or end. And still, the stone remains untouched. Not a single bead. But the people, somehow, are wetter than ever, soaked in meaning, dripping with metaphors, and absolutely sure they understand the signs. By the 10th day, the village accepts it not happily, not loudly, but in the quiet, defeated way that one accepts the last cup of soup being mostly water and disappointment. The stone is dry. Not just dry, but confidently dry. Dust has begun to settle on its surface again, forming a soft grey veil like a shawl on the shoulders of a retired actress who once had a role in a play about clouds. You poke it gently, not touching, just observing. No shimmer, no glisten, not even a suspicious glint pretending to be interesting. The priest finally declares the miracle complete. That word lingers awkwardly in the air like a compliment delivered too late at a funeral. Complete, he says again. The stone gave what it could. We witnessed it. Now we must move forward. No one knows what that means, but they nod anyway, because nodding is easier than disagreeing when your faith has been drafted into local tourism. The moisture keeper folds up his charts. He still wears the sash, though now it's slightly wrinkled and stained with beet juice. He tells you he's taking a break to explore other forms of dampness, possibly mushrooms. You nod too. You've run out of reactions. You've been staring at a rock for 10 days. You feel like one. And then somehow, inevitably someone proposes a festival. It's not called a celebration. That would be too optimistic. It's called the Great Dry Festival, and its purpose is vague. Some say it honours the stone's restraint. Others claim it's to commemorate the week we all almost believed. A child says it's because the goat needs something to do. No one argues. Preparations begin immediately. There's a parade with one cart, 3 drums, and a float built from hay bales shaped into abstract weather shapes. You are told one is a thundercloud. It looks more like a sheep who lost an argument. Another is a raindrop, but from certain angles it resembles an embarrassed pear. The baker makes cookies shaped like dry stones. They are crunchy, flavourless, and immediately popular. People line up to buy them because eating the past is easier than understanding it. The priest offers a blessing to the wind. The wind does not respond. You are asked to recite a poem. You say you don't have one. They insist. You end up mumbling a sentence about patience being shaped like a pebble and are applauded anyway. That night, after the last bun has been sold and the goat has eaten part of the thundercloud float, you sit alone on your usual bench. The square is quiet again. Candles flicker in the shrine, now more of a memory pile than a holy site. Someone has left a shoe filled with dried herbs beside the stone. You don't ask. The stone is, as ever, unmoved. And yet, in its absolute stillness, it has pulled the whole village into motion, into hopes, songs, arguments, rituals, pastries and silence. You look up. No clouds. But for the first time, that feels fine. In the manor houses of the upper class, dinner was never just dinner. It was a ritual, a signal, a performance staged not only for guests but for the sky itself. You arrive on a Thursday, or what you're told is Thursday, though calendars here seem to operate more like suggestions than systems, and you are immediately invited not to eat, but to wait, because tonight, they say, the weather might permit a roast. You glance out the window. The sky is calm, quiet, no thunder, no fog, not even a particularly smug cloud. But the steward insists the kitchen cannot proceed until the astrologer finishes consulting the moon chart, and the geese have settled into their preferred huddle formation. We once served fish during a fire moon, the steward whispers. The countess didn't sleep for a week. You wait. In the hallway, a clock ticks in uncertain rhythms, as if afraid to commit to a single pace. Footmen move like dancers practicing silently in a dream. In the kitchen, you hear activity but not the chopping of vegetables or the satisfying sizzle of butter in a hot pan. Instead, it's the sound of argument. Low, frantic, flour-dusted debate. The geese, it turns out, are not cooperating. 3 of them have faced east. 1 has taken offence and is staring due north with the intensity of a betrayed noble. A 5th refuses to sit, instead standing in a puddle and honking like someone who has just discovered the concept of disappointment. The cook blames the moon. The astrologer blames humidity. The footman blames the goose. You blame hunger. Still, no food appears. Someone reads goose entrails from a diagram, not real entrails. Thank heavens, just an artistic rendering in coloured ink. It's unclear, they announce. Could be duck weather. Could be lentils. You sigh. You were promised lamb. The Countess enters, trailing perfume and uncertainty. Her sleeves are wide enough to hide secrets, or perhaps regrets. She glances once at the sky through an arched window, nods slowly, and declares, "We shall dine." With caution. This means soup. It always means soup. You prepare your stomach for disappointment with a side of thyme. The meal is served in near silence. Each course arrives with a whispered explanation not of ingredients, but of weather justification. The carrots were chosen because the sun was slightly gold at noon. The bread was baked after a magpie landed near the eastern gate. The wine was opened because the head goose finally sat down. You eat, it's fine. But you can't help wondering what the meal could have been if the sky had smiled more generously, if the breeze had leaned warmer, if the stars had pointed their fingers in a bolder direction. Perhaps meat, perhaps spice, perhaps a dinner not designed by poultry. After the plates are cleared and the guests nod at each other with the polite fatigue of people who've endured the weather's indecision, you are shown to a room. The window is narrow. The blankets are stiff. The moon shines directly on your pillow like it's checking in. You lie down and realize tomorrow's breakfast will depend entirely on whether the rooster decides to sing or sulk. The invitation arrived wrapped in lace and nerves. A supper, it read. 8 bells. Bring an appetite and avoid pessimism. You hold it like a fragile compliment, unsure what qualifies as pessimistic attire. A steward arrives shortly after with a note in smaller print. Weather permitting. Consult the western sky after Vespers. You glance out the window. The western sky is still there. Slightly grey. Slightly pink. Like a bruise that doesn't know whether it's healing or arriving. You dress. Not extravagantly, but cautiously a middle ground ensemble that suggests curiosity without hubris. The host, Baroness Ivelina, is known for her moods, which are rumoured to change with the barometric pressure. She once threw a fig tart through a stained glass window because a drizzle interrupted dessert. You arrive just before sunset. The manor is dimly lit, all flickering sconces and long shadows, dramatic ambience, or a failed attempt at optimism. Guests murmur in the drawing room. No one sits fully. Everyone leans. A servant passes by offering air-dried beet chips with salt and anticipation. You take one. It crunches like dried rumours. Then the astrologer enters. He looks worried. Not professionally worried, not the dignified, academic worry of someone who studied too many stars. This is personal worry. The kind of worry that suggests the moon just made a face at him. He whispers to the Baroness. She nods, then sighs, then places both hands flat on the table, like someone trying to keep it from levitating. The moon has entered a difficult quadrant, she says, and tonight's vapour spiral has frayed. Everyone exhales in disappointment, which, in this house, is a quiet sound, like silk being folded too quickly. Dinner is cancelled. You're offered consolation scones. They are cold, not intentionally, just resigned. The jam has formed a skin. You eat one out of principle and chew slowly, hoping to extract meaning from its blandness. Someone tries to salvage the evening by starting a discussion about cloud shapes and their influence on digestion. A man with a decorative cane insists that cirrus formations increase bloating. Another swears by stratocumulus for stimulating polite conversation. You stare at your teacup and imagine it floating away. Later, as guests begin to leave in carriages that creak with unspent appetite, you linger near the window. Outside, the moon hangs like a tired coin. It doesn't look angry. It doesn't look pleased. It just looks bored. You wonder how many decisions, how many soups, songs, and sudden mood swings have been blamed on its pale, silent face. You wonder if it ever notices. If it rolls slightly in its orbit every time a noble cancels lamb due to a vapor spiral. Back in your room, the fire has gone out. You wrap yourself in a blanket that smells faintly of lavender and unused silver. Your stomach grumbles once not loudly, just enough to remind you that dinner never came. You close your eyes. And somewhere above, the moon does nothing. Again, it's late autumn, and the invitation smells like nutmeg and nervous decisions. Tonight's meal, the note says, will be determined by bone, specifically the left femur of the manor goose, boiled precisely at moonrise and inspected by the estate's appointed augur, who specializes in poultry-based revelations. You blink twice, reread it, and wonder if your appetite can survive another course of superstition. Upon arrival, the kitchen is a performance stage. Steam clouds the windows, flour hangs in the air like indoor snow, and someone is whispering to a bundle of herbs with more reverence than most people give their gods. You are escorted past 3 different minas, none finalized, and brought into the viewing chamber. It's just a drawing room, really, but the chairs have been moved to face a small velvet draped table where the goosebone lies baize in state on a silver tray. Everyone stares. The bone is thin, pale, and unremarkable. If it were found on a path, it might be mistaken for a piece of oddly shaped driftwood. But tonight, it is destiny. The augur, a man in layered wool and perpetual squint, adjusts his monocle, taps the bone twice with a fork, and announces soup. A pause. Turnip. A longer pause. With regret, someone claps politely. The rest sigh into their embroidered sleeves. The cook immediately changes direction. The fish that had been nearly poached is returned to its bowl. The venison is told to wait. You watch it all unfold as though trapped inside a dream, cooked at the wrong temperature, everything slightly too warm and slightly too indecisive. Dinner is served with great formality and limited joy. The turnip soup is thick, beige, and oddly defensive in texture. It clings to the spoon like it has opinions. Bread is offered. It is dry, but enthusiastic. A woman across from you mutters something about the bone being vengeful this week. Another guest dips her roll in silence and stares at the chandelier like it holds answers the soup refuses to give. Halfway through the meal, the augur clears his throat. There was a secondary reading, he says. The marrow line suggested interruption. Everyone freezes. The butler nods grimly and bolts the dining room door. Moments later, a gust of wind howls down the chimney, rattling the silver. A log in the hearth splits with a hiss. A servant drops a tureen. The bone was right. Everyone nods as though the sky has sent them a memo, and a thunderless tension settles over dessert. You are served a poached pear that tastes like it wished to be an apple. Someone whispers thanks to the goose. You are not sure if they're serious. By the end of the evening, the guests depart slowly, their coats lined with crumbs and doubt. You return to your chamber and find a feather on your pillow. No one explains it. You consider asking, then decide it's better not to know. You lie in bed, hands folded, stomach mostly full, brain humming with the quiet madness of noble logic. Somewhere beneath the house, the rest of the goose is being turned into broth. You suspect it already knows what tomorrow's weather will be. You are awoken by the sound of bells, not church bells, not alarm bells. Just one bell, small, distant, and rung with the enthusiasm of someone hoping the sky is listening. It is barely past dawn. Your pillow has developed a fold so sharp it could be used as a tool, and your back feels like it spent the night debating the ethics of comfort with the mattress. You shuffle to the window and peer out. The sky is pale, undecided, the colour of milk that's forgotten whether it's sour. Breakfast, you're told, is pending, not being prepared, not warming on the stove, pending. It all depends on the wind. Specifically, the east wind, which the manor cook insists must be present before any eggs are cracked. The yolks rebel if the air comes from the north, she says. Last time, they curdled in protest. You nod. not because it makes sense, but because arguing with someone holding a ladle at sunrise rarely ends well. You join the other guests in the solarium, which is really just a large room full of potted plants pretending to be exotic. Everyone is sipping tea that tastes faintly of thyme and anticipation. A maid flits in and out carrying a small strip of silk on a stick, waving it near open windows, then squinting at its flutters. Still west, she reports. No one eats. The bread is on standby. The porridge sits stoically in bowls covered with linen cloths, steaming gently under captivity. A tray of fruit has begun to wilt in solidarity. The butter has reached a state best described as philosophical. A footman with particularly large eyebrows begins telling a story about a time the wind failed to arrive until noon, and the entire meal was converted into lunch out of respect for atmospheric indecision. The Countess sighs and says she remembers that day the cheese was tragic, and the melon refused to participate. Half an hour passes. The maid returns. Southeast, she announces. The cook mutters something unrepeatable. The eggs are returned to their bowls. The butter is retracted. A spoon is flung, gently, into a sink. Then, finally a breeze. Not dramatic, not poetic, just a breeze, but it enters from the east, curls around the curtains like a bored cat, and brushes the edge of the silk strip. "It's here," the maid whispers. The cook cheers. A duck somewhere in the yard quacks approvingly. The kitchen explodes into motion. Bread is sliced with determination. Eggs hit pans with purpose. Bacon appears, crisped and unapologetic. Porridge is freed from its fabric prison and topped with a dollop of something sweet that may or may not be intentional. You are handed a plate with more ceremony than a wedding gift. You eat. The eggs are perfectly soft. The toast has edges like resolved arguments. The jam is bright enough to make you forgive the wait. Around you, conversation stirs like a well-behaved breeze, soft, pleasant, and only occasionally absurd. And just before the meal ends, the wind shifts again. Back to the west. The maid closes the window with a look of exhausted satisfaction. Breakfast has been served. The sky was kind for now. It was supposed to be a luncheon, not a feast, not a banquet, just a gentle, floral, lavender-scented garden meal beneath trellises heavy with grapes no one would eat. You receive the invitation in a silver envelope that crinkles like anxiety. Weather permitting, it says, in delicate script that smells faintly of ink and denial. The hostess, Lady Varela, is famous for two things: wearing 5 shades of white at once, and insisting dew is a conspiracy. "It's not natural," she once whispered while dabbing her gloves. Moisture should not arrive uninvited. Her gardens are vast, her meals delicate, and her tolerance for humidity non-existent. You arrive early. The air is already thick with effort. Gardeners scurry around with towels, patting down leaves like they're comforting distressed relatives. A servant is fanning the bread table. Someone else is polishing a teapot that seems perfectly clean. The strawberries are laid out in spirals so symmetrical they appear to have been arranged by a particularly anxious mathematician. And yet it is damp, not rainy, just wet in that confusing, passive-aggressive way nature sometimes gets. Every surface glistens slightly, like it's sweating out secrets. A chair cushion is declared compromised. It is replaced, then replaced again, then deemed cursed. Lady Varela appears at exactly the wrong moment. She is dressed in all 5 whites. Lace, silk, something vaguely crinkled, something aggressively starched, and one layer that appears to be made entirely of indignation. She surveys the garden like a queen who has just learned the peasants are damp. "This will not do," she says. The dew is blamed. The moss is blamed. The nearby pond, despite being both ancient and stationary, is also blamed. Guests begin arriving, stepping lightly on gravel paths that squish in ways gravel never should. Someone slips. A small scream is heard. A canopy tray is sacrificed. The wind, for once, is not blamed, it's too still to take the fall. The luncheon is moved indoors, but not before a brief ceremony in which a crystal bowl of dry petals is placed in the centre of the garden as an offering to the air. You ask what it's meant to do. The answer you receive is, shame the mist into stillness. You do not ask again. Inside, the dining room smells like panic and lavender polish. The food arrives late, apologetic, and slightly damp, not from the dew, allegedly, but from emotional absorption. You eat a sandwich that tastes like it overheard bad news. The salad wilts with theatrical flair. Lady Varela pretends nothing happened. She raises a toast to resilience and declares the weather unfit for polite society. The guests nod, chew politely, and pretend the seats aren't slightly soggy. A man near the window opens it a crack, only for it to drip on his cuff. He closes it with the solemnity of a man betrayed by sky. You finish your tea, which is lukewarm and mysterious, and you realize, in the world of noble meals, weather is not background. It's a guest. A moody, manipulative, glistening guest who doesn't knock, never RSVPs, and still manages to ruin the seating chart. There's a rustle at your door just before dawn, a knock, a scroll, and a faint smell of celery. The scroll contains a single sentence written in gold ink. Join us for the eclipse supper. Arrive before the sky forgets itself. You blink twice. You're not entirely sure what that means, but the handwriting is intimidating, and there's a wax seal shaped like a fork, so it must be important. You prepare slowly, not out of laziness, but out of caution. An eclipse, they say, affects digestion. This particular one is expected to pass just after dusk and promises a celestial alignment of flavor and shadow, according to the astrologer who now doubles as a menu consultant. The last eclipse dinner, apparently, ended with 3 faintings, a chicken-related revelation, and 1 mysterious puddle. You arrive on time. The table is long and heavily symmetrical. Silver gleams in every direction. Candles are pre-lit, despite it being daylight, to prepare the food for darkness. Every plate is covered with a small silk cloth. It's not to keep the food warm, there is no food yet. It's to keep the food conceptually hidden until the moon decides who deserves it. A harp plays itself in the corner. Or rather, a thin man plays it so quietly it may as well be self-playing. The guests are already seated, whispering about moon angles and horseradish. One woman claims she's fasting until the shadow crosses the second cypress. No one knows which cypress she means. Someone nods anyway. Then the eclipse begins. It's not dramatic. It creeps like an overly polite but determined butler, gradual, dimming the garden 1 teaspoon of light at a time. Someone gasps. Someone else adjusts their napkin, as if preparing for a duel. The first course is served. Lettuce. Just lettuce. Not a salad. A single leaf. Presented upright on a porcelain spoon like it's auditioning for something. It reflects the waning crescent, the server whispers, and encourages internal mystery. You chew it. It tastes like moonlight and unspoken questions. The next dish arrives during totality. It's soup, cold of course, with no spoon. You are expected to sip directly from the bowl to mimic the behavior of lunar tides. It dribbles. A guest near you sneezes into her elbow and is immediately applauded for empathic resonance. Dessert is a dark custard served inside an empty gourd. You eat slowly. It's not bad. It's not good either. It's eclipsed. The flavor refuses to commit. The texture is both smooth and secretly crunchy, like it wasn't expecting to be consumed. You wonder if that was intentional. And then, as the moon retreats and the stars pretend they were never involved, the host, a man wearing robes patterned with planetary regret, stands to declare the feast concluded. "Let this meal pass into you as the shadow passed over us," he says. No one claps. They just breathe together. You leave with a small candle and a sprig of sage as a parting gift. The candle is unlit. The sage is dry. Together, they seem symbolic of something, though you're not sure what. You hold them like wisdom you didn't ask for. And as you walk back to your room, you realize the eclipse lasted longer than the meal, and it made slightly more sense. The invitation arrives smudged, not elegantly aged, not weathered with charm, just slightly damp, like it sat too long next to an opinionated teacup. "Join us for a fog-born picnic," it says. Arrival conditional, mist required, clarity discouraged. You stare at it for a moment, unsure whether you've been invited to lunch or to a metaphor. Fog, apparently, is the main ingredient. The hostess, Countess Belladette is known for her commitment to atmospheric dining. She believes food tastes best when reality is softened, when the landscape fades and the edges of people blur like bread in broth. Her last gathering took place entirely in drizzle. The soup was served in silence. The spoons were wooden. Everyone wept politely afterward. You wait all morning. No fog. The sky is too honest a wide, bold blue that offers no ambiguity. The trees are sharply outlined. Birds behave with clarity. Even the grass looks decisive. You sip tea and watch servants spritz the hedges with water in an effort to simulate dampness. It isn't working. At noon, Belladette appears on the lawn. She's draped in sheer linen, clutching a bowl of crushed herbs and muttering in the direction of the breeze. It's resisting, she says. The sky isn't in the mood for softness. You nod solemnly, as if you too have experienced a stubborn atmosphere. Then, against all logic, a fog arrives. Not thick, not dramatic. Just a hush in the air of visible hesitation between the hills and the garden wall. The Countess gasps. The signal is given. The picnic begins. Blankets are laid. Cushions are scattered with theatrical indifference. The food appears, all pale. Pale eggs, pale bread, pale cheese. Even the grapes have been selected for their ghostly hue. No colour, Belladette explains. Colour is too certain. You bite into a sandwich that tastes like reflection. The bread is soft in the way thoughts are before they become beliefs. The cheese crumbles, then apologizes. There is water not flavoured, not chilled, just present. One man chews his grape for a full minute before concluding that it reminds him of an unresolved conversation from childhood. Conversation, naturally, turns philosophical. Someone asks if fog is just sky forgetting where it belongs. Someone else wonders if taste is just memory disguised as texture. A third person points at a biscuit and claims it's the platonic ideal of hunger. You eat slowly, cautiously, as though the fog might taste you back. The air thickens slightly. The trees soften. A bird calls, then regrets it. Belladette smiles. Now, she says, we are ready for pudding. It arrives in the form of misted pears wrapped in rice paper. You're instructed not to chew, just to hold it on your tongue until it decides to be sweet. You obey, and somehow it works. The sweetness arrives like a whispered confession. Brief, delicate, absolutely unjustified. As the fog lifts, the guests do not move. They sit, wrapped in linen and ambiguity, chewing their thoughts. You stand, brush invisible dew from your coat, and walk slowly toward the hedge. The day never became clear, and that, apparently, was the point. You receive the update on a scroll tied with nervous ribbon. The original plan, a grand evening banquet beneath lanterns, and beside the ornamental pond, has been temporarily suspended due to unsettled breezes. The wording is precise. Not cancelled. Not delayed. Suspended. As if the wind itself has put everything gently on hold, like a hand raised in apology. You reread it, sitting by the fire, with a cup of something herbal that tastes like surrender. Outside, the breeze rustles the ivy in a way that feels neither menacing nor reassuring. It's just uncertain. The kind of breeze that would write an apology note and then forget to send it. Still, preparations continue. The staff are polishing silver in silence. The napkins are folded into shapes that resemble birds considering flight. The pudding is preemptively chilled, but not committed. Even the wine is uncorked, yet breathing carefully, as though aware it might not be needed. You dress anyway. You're told to wear something resilient to mood shifts. You choose a jacket that looks confident but doesn't make promises. At the door, a footman offers you a glass of air and empty flute, held ceremoniously, to toast the atmosphere. You raise it politely. You drink nothing. The guests arrive in layers, not all at once that would suggest decisiveness. They trickle in like hesitant thoughts, unsure whether to sit or hover, whether to compliment the centerpieces or blame the sky. Someone mentions that the wind seems less anxious now. Someone else says it's simply brooding. The hostess, Lady Estrelle, appears in a gown made entirely of fabric that moves even when she doesn't. We may dine, she says, if the breeze permits grace. It does not. A gust knocks over a decorative vase. A dog howls once, then hides under the buffet table. A lantern flickers too aggressively. Lady Estrelle pauses, narrows her eyes at the moon, and decides, let us not anger the air. The meal is paused. The first course, which had just arrived in silver bowls shaped like trembling tulips, is returned to the kitchen. The tulips tremble no more. The guests migrate indoors. A fire is lit. Conversation shifts from weather to weather's implications. One man insists that breezes have memory. A woman counters that they have preferences. Someone else blames the menu the duck was too bold. Wind dislikes confidence. You take a cracker and eat it slowly, as if hoping for a different outcome. Eventually, something is served, not a feast, just a compromise. Small dishes of chilled vegetables, each accompanied by a parchment scroll explaining why it was emotionally appropriate for the weather. The beets, apparently, were harvested under a cloud that resembled a sleeping fox. The carrots were washed in rain considered non-confrontational. You eat. You try not to overthink the texture. By the time dessert appears, a puff pastry shaped like a weather vane. Dusted with uncertainty and powdered sugar, the guests are leaning back, lulled by the rhythm of rationalization. Lady Estrelle lifts her glass of actual wine and says softly, "May the breeze someday decide." And for tonight, that's enough. This time, you're not even surprised when the dinner invitation includes a star chart. It arrives at your chamber door wrapped in velvet and panic. The handwriting is sharp, dramatic, and slightly uneven, as though penned by someone halfway through a revelation and holding their breath the entire time. The dinner, it explains, will be served only when Mars and Venus appear, not in opposition, not too flirtatious, but simply polite. You hold the chart up to the candlelight and realize it means after moonrise, but before Jupiter starts sulking. You arrive at the estate, which tonight has been transformed into an observatory disguised as a dining room. Telescopes point in every direction. Guests hold star maps like Menis. One woman has painted her nails to match the constellation Cassiopeia. The cook has not yet begun. He's waiting for astrological clearance. You take a seat under a ceiling painted with golden zodiac symbols and try not to knock over the decorative astrolabe beside your plate. It spins gently, as if uncertain whether to measure time or mood. The hostess, Marchioness Alora, enters wearing a gown embroidered with meteors. "Welcome," she says. "The stew shall begin when Saturn sighs." No one asks how they'll know. They simply nod. While you wait, small amuse-bouches are served, a single cracker with a cheese smear shaped like the Big Dipper, and a candied plum arranged to resemble Mars in repose. You eat them slowly, chewing more thoughtfully than usual, which seems to be expected. A servant corrects your spoon placement based on Mercury's current attitude. You apologize to the cutlery. An hour passes. Still no main course, but the stars, they're moving. A whisper travels through the guests. The alignment is close. Someone adjusts their chair for optimal cosmic reception. Another pours wine only after a nearby astrologer signals with a discreet wink. Then a soft bell rings. The stars have nodded. In an instant, the room changes. Flames are lit in copper sconces. Curtains are drawn to limit terrestrial interference. And the stew begins. Not just any stew, the harmonious stew, brewed under 5 skies, stirred with clockwise intent, and left to simmer until Venus reached a conversational altitude. It's served in bowls shaped like moons. The broth is rich. The vegetables are perfectly tender. The meat has no name, but everyone calls it aligned. You eat slowly, because fast chewing might offend Neptune. Conversation flows now, soft and oddly rhythmic, punctuated by glances at the heavens. Someone declares the stew ethically spiced. Another says they feel celestially grounded. A third simply stares into their bowl and whispers, "Finally." Dessert arrives in the form of tiny cakes stacked in constellations. Yours is shaped like Orion's belt and tastes like cinnamon ambition. You leave the table full but slightly weightless. The stars did not guarantee dessert, but tonight they delivered. You're barely awake when the summons arrives. Not a scroll this time, but a small square of parchment slipped under your door, folded like guilt and scented with honey and indecision. It reads, simply, "If the cloud winks, meet us by the orchard. Wear soft shoes. Don't bring skepticism." You blink at it for a long moment. It's well past midnight. The moon is high, but hiding. The sky is neither fully clear nor committed to overcast. Somewhere beyond the orchard, someone sneezes, followed by the unmistakable clink of ceramic plates being arranged by people who have strong opinions about wind direction. You dress quietly, choosing boots that don't squeak in a jacket with minimal ambition. By the time you reach the orchard, a small group is already gathered, all of them in varying degrees of wool, silk and confusion. Lanterns hang from the lowest branches like sleepy fireflies who took a wrong turn. A table long, narrow, and overconfident stretches between two apple trees. Each seat is marked by a sprig of something aromatic and difficult to identify. At the head of the table sits Lord Peregrine, a man known for inventing meals that require natural permission. Last season, he cancelled an entire souffle because the humidity wasn't spiritually compatible. Tonight, he holds a small mirror angled toward the sky. "It's coming," he says. You follow his gaze. There it is, a single cloud drifting across the moon, pausing, thinning, shifting slightly in shape. It doesn't vanish. It doesn't expand. It just folds at one edge, very briefly, like a sheep winking in slow motion. Lord Peregrine gasps. Someone claps. A napkin is waved in approval. The feast may begin. It starts with small bowls of chilled cider, served in cups carved from hollowed pears. "To honor the orchard's breath," the server says, as though you've all been inhaling tree thoughts. The cider tastes faintly of ginger and clearly of effort. You drink, and the moon reemerges, now behaving itself. Next comes a plate of toasted seed cakes, each one stamped with a symbol no one can explain. Yours resembles a goat debating whether or not to sit. You take a bite. It's dry, but purposeful, the kind of texture that reminds you someone thought this was deeply clever. The main course arrives on trays lined with moss. It's a root vegetable medley, roasted and arranged in the shape of a spiraling breeze. Each carrot points east. Each beet is carved into a frown. To confuse the weather spirits, you're told. You nod. It doesn't help. You eat anyway. Conversation never quite forms. It drifts soft, airy, occasionally punctuated by questions like, do clouds feel shy? Or is mustard seasonal in spirit? Someone hums a tune with no rhythm. A spoon falls and is declared symbolic. No one picks it up. Dessert is a puff of meringue shaped like a cumulus, with a single raisin in the center. You chew it slowly, trying not to disturb its symbolic geometry. It vanishes on your tongue. You are told this means the sky has accepted your offering. You return to bed unsure if you've eaten or participated in a theatrical weather seance. Either way, you are oddly full. And the cloud does not wink again. And now, the candles have all burned lower. The clouds have drifted beyond your reach. And the stone, the stew and the winking moon are nothing but soft impressions in the folds of your imagination. You followed shepherds through droughts and watched nobles cancel dinners because the geese had a bad feeling. You've waited beside a sweating stone, doubted a lettuce leaf, and honoured a biscuit because it vaguely resembled a weather omen. And somehow, none of it was truly about the weather. Thank you for drifting through this strange, sleepy journey with Deadpan History. If you're still here, either fully awake or mostly dreaming, I hope this quiet unravelling of beliefs has helped ease your mind. And if not, perhaps it at least made you feel like the sky, in all its moods, was entirely against you today. And now, as you lie there, you know the loop will wait once more for you.